Good morning and happy Sabbath.
Good morning.
Heb ik gedaan. Good morning.
Have you
Wat
pinned
heb ik eigenlijk
yourself?
gedaan? Moet ik dan nog iets anders doen?
Nee, spotlight yourself.
Aha.
Niet
Oeh.
pinnen. Pinnen doe je alleen voor je eigen.
Yeah, but I don't see that option. Oh, yeah.
Die borstven wel.
Okay. Good morning and happy Sabbath. Let's start with a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you that we have another Sabbath. Thank you for the island in the middle of the week that we can come to rest and think about other things. We want to think about a topic today that has to do with the culture war that is raging in our society. And we want to ask your presence and guidance in this study, that you be with us, that you guide us through the thoughts that we are sharing today, and that it might clarify some new points for us. And we thank you for all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so today we want to talk about gender-sensitive language, which is a topic that is very agitated at the moment. I don't know if it's the same in every country internationally. I know from different languages that are where this is a topic, but there are by nature already there are languages that are ungendered, that don't have that gender sensitive language is not so relevant. But in German, in Germany, it is a big subject at the moment, because German is a highly gendered language, just as French, for example. You have certain adjectives and pronouns that change when they are referring to a man. You write them differently as when they are referring to a woman. So you always have a male form and a female form for pronouns, for adjectives, these things. And so there's with the change we witness in society, that we are trying to be more inclusive, that we are paying attention to the LGBTQ community, all these topics that are changing our society. There is now efforts to also change our language. So I prepared a presentation, but of course it's in German, so I'm not sure I will share it, but maybe I'll just use it as a guidance. Oh. So today we're going to look at some basic definitions. Oh, did I share screen? No, at the moment, no. If I will, then I'll let you know. So we are going to look at some basics and definitions. What is gendering? Gender-sensitive language. We are going to look at some history and some milestones and some pioneers that played an important role when it comes to these changes in our language, in the German language. This is focused mainly on the German language. Then I want to look at some of the forms that exist, how there are different ways you can adapt your language. I also want to share some points why we gender. So why would it be important? And why do some people think it is not appropriate or not important? And then lastly, we want, if we still have time, we want to look at the gender. There was the gender ban in Bavaria recently in South Germany. In March, actually, there was a gender ban, so that it is now prohibited at schools, universities, and and governmental institutions to use gender-sensitive language. I'll just arrange my screen because I cannot see you guys. So. Okay, in Germany, in German, when we talk about gendering, we actually use this word like this as well in German, gendering, or in German we say gendern. But when we talk about this, what do we mean? It means that you use gender-sensitive language. You often hear the term inclusive language as well. Inclusive language. It's about equality of the sexes in written and spoken language. Oh yeah. Of genders, actually. It's that you use yeah, I have all kinds of German terms here on my screen, so I need to translate them because I don't even know these terms in English. It's like that you use that you're aware of gender in your use of language. And often you also hear the term gender neutral. Gender neutral phrasing, for example. Gender neutral phrasing. I'm just throwing some terms at you that we can connect with the term gendering. Then there are also some negative terms that you will hear. In German, this is the term 𝗔𝗯𝗴𝗃. It means gender craziness. It's used by the opponents of gender sensitive language, but in general of opponents, people who oppose the whole idea of being inclusive as a society. It's more from the right-wing spectrum. Gender mania, gender madness, and gender gaga. That's really the term that's also used in the media. And that means the same thing. Read it, right? So, okay, but let's start with because if we want to understand why it's even necessary to adapt our language, we need to look at the status quo. What was the language like up to now? What is the problem? Why do we even see a need to change something in the language? And that's something we need to, a phenomenon we need to look at that is called the generic masculine. And the generic masculine is a form, as it says. Generic means that you use something in general, or you apply something generally. So it's just basically the masculine form that is applied as a generalizing form, even to include women. So if you have, in German, if you have a teacher, teacher is not a problem in English. Teacher is applicable to men as much as to women. But in German, you have a man. A man is a Lehrer. The ER ending is generally used for male words. If you have a woman would be a Lehrerin. Oh. So it's the same word as the male form, but then you add in. But if you talk about both, then you use the same form as the masculine. Then if you talk about a plural, then the masculine form is used. And that's just explained as the generic masculine. It's just, people who use this, or it's just been always so normal to use this. And I don't think society has really thought about that it is actually the male form, the masculine form. I'll just give you an example, because let me now share my screen. Are you logged in now? I'm going to introduce you to this lady. Her name is 𝘂𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗄. She's one of the founders of the feminist linguistics in Germany. This discipline emerged in the 1970s in Germany. She is considered the mother of the gender-sensitive language. And she also, maybe I have to explain it. She's also the inventor of the gender pause. So if you have a word like Lehrer, and you want to say it in a gender-sensitive way, you would say keep me spelling Lehrer, and then it depends what symbol you want to use. You can use the star and then say innen. Lehrer, let me use this. You can say Lehrerin. if you say it with this pause, lerarin, then or you talk about several. If you talk in general, teachers earn this and this amount per month. Then you would say LehrerInnen earn about this amount every month. And if you make this pause, then you indicate that you include all different sexes and genders, so that you also include women, and you also include people who don't identify themselves to belong to the binary spectrum, so also non-binary people, intersex people, and diverse genders. That is one example. You can use a star, you can use a colon. There are various options, but I will get back to that later. So this Louise Pusch, she invented this gender pause. That when something is written like this, that you can pronounce it in a certain way. And what she said, for example, I have a quote from her here. I'll just read it to you. She said, "Many women don't even notice their verbal degradation in language. We have become accustomed to it like all the other forms of violence against us, from subtle to brutal." So she was one of the women who started to make a loud noise when it came to this subject. One of the first. Now let's look what she had some critique to the generic masculine. So she criticized the generic masculine in the German language. She said, men, they're almost, I have to translate. Men are always categorized correctly. So if someone talks about men, they would use this form automatically, because even if they mean several people, they would use the masculine as well. Men are always categorized correctly, women almost never, because in our language, the rule is 99 teachers and 99 male teachers and 1 female teacher are together, they are all male teachers. Mm-hmm. So you can have 99 of these and 1. Oh, sorry. Sorry. You can have 99 female teachers, sorry, and 1 male teacher, but they become the male together. Gone are the 99 women, no longer to be found. Lost in the men's drawer. So they are just put in the men's drawer, she says. The metaphor has the effect that only male images appear in our minds when we talk about workers, students, doctors, poets, or pensioners. And in German, all these words I just read, they are gendered, they are male, they have the male gender. So Arbeiter, Studenten, Ärzte, Dichter, Rentner, they're all male when they're used in their general form. Even if those doctors or pensioners were in reality predominantly female doctors or pensioners. So she has critique about this generic masculine. And she makes it very clear that there are these drawers in the language. And when you don't particularly name the women, when you don't use this form, then when you don't make efforts to make it visible, then the women basically, they don't exist in the language. And that causes women to be invisible in German. And what has been suggested by people who defend the generic masculine, because it's just so normal, because this was always what we always did, and they would prefer for it to stay that way. They suggest, yeah, but women are always included when we use this. We always mean women as well. We just don't name them. So, and funnily, it is that this 𝘂𝗶𝗃𝗲𝗄 that I showed you, she was one of the women that suggested, why don't we just switch to the generic feminine? Because there were efforts to, every time you use the word teacher in German, what you should do is actually say Lehrer und, so, and LehrerInnen, Lehrerinnen. So every time you use a word like this that is gendered, you would have to name both the male and the female. And of course, that's very, that's not quite simple. It makes sentences long. If you have several of these words, then you always have to name both. It is kind of complex and clumsy. So the opponents of gender-sensitive language, they would say, yeah, we cannot always name women as well. So then 𝘂𝗶𝗃𝗄𝗃 would say, yeah, but why? So then now let's switch it. Now all the time we always used the generic masculine. Let's now switch to the generic feminine, because, you know, if you use the feminine, the male is included in the female as well. If you read the word like this, the male is in here, but the female is not in here. So we can just switch to this one. That would mean we don't have to name both all the time, because the male form is there as well. And of course, that is opposed even louder. Yeah. But I'll now give you an example for this mental representation that she also talked about. She said, if we always use this generic masculine, that causes if we speak of doctors, if we speak of poets, if we speak of pensioners, then that association we have in our mind, the image we create, is always a man. And I'll share an example for that. Just see if it works as well in English. Am I still sharing screen? Mm-hmm. Now I need a different one. Select a window. Oh. Yeah, this one. So I just translated the example. And if you look here to the English, it says, Dr. Brandt lives in Hamburg and has a brother in Berlin. And this brother is Professor Brandt. But Professor Brandt has no brother in Hamburg. How can that be?
Brandt lives in Hamburg, has a brother in Berlin. Professor Brandt.
Dr. Brandt is a woman.
Yeah. In English, it doesn't matter because the words are not gendered anyway. But in German, this Dr. Brandt is a very, it's a male form. And if you read it, the automatic association you get in your mind, or for most people, the first thing they think of if they read Dr. Brandt, it's a man. So they wouldn't even, think twice. But then if they think twice, then they have to find out, okay, how does this work? Oh yeah, oh, okay, it's a woman. It can be a woman as well. Oh yeah, true. But that shows the generic masculine, it always means a man first. Yeah, it could be a woman, but the first thing you think of is a man. And that's, if you use examples like that, that's proof for that. Was that understandable? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, so that shows how deeply rooted we have such stereotypes are in our culture, and therefore in our language. Language is inseparable with culture. And so that's what she means when she said women are invisible. They are rendered invisible in our language. And so the effort to use gender-sensitive language is to make women visible, is to make other minorities visible, people that are not identifying themselves on the binary spectrum, and that we question the normal, normal thinking, the normal associations we have, that we question these things, we challenge them. So the language is also an effort to change our thinking. Changing the language changes our thinking. Now let's dive into some history. In the 1960s, that was during the second wave of feminism. And in the German-speaking countries, feminists started using a slash. How do you call it? They started using this symbol to also make the women visible. So for lehrer, if we take the example teacher again, they would write LehrerInnen. Because women were also going to work more, and especially for professional titles like teacher and these things, they wanted to make women visible. There was a need to make them visible because they were there. So that's how also the changes in our society, there are changes in society, and they need somehow to be reflected in our language as well. In the 1970s, there started to be we started to hear a loud noise from feminist language critics in the German-speaking countries. So I already mentioned one of them. In the 70s, you had feminists, how do you say that? It was also the time where feminist linguistics came up. So linguistics are the science of language. And this is then the feminist science of language. And I already named Louise Pusch. And another important name is 𝘃𝗶𝗴𝗲𝗏. Even for a German-speaking person, this is a very uncommon name. 𝘃𝗶𝗴𝗲𝗏. Actually, I'm going to show you a picture of her as well, because it is really, these women, they are, even though they did important things, like so many women that did important things, we don't know anything about them. We don't rarely hear about people like them. They're, even in history, they're invisible. Oh, I actually had a, oh yeah, here. Going to share. I found a lot of pictures where she's still young, but I wanted the most recent, I think. But I think even this picture is more than 10 years old. So yeah. And then there were two more authors. There were these two women and two others. They wrote the first guidelines for gender-sensitive language in German. And from the other two, I didn't even find a picture at all. So, yeah. So these two women, they played an important role. Yeah, in the yeah, you cannot read it anyway, it's German. But maybe it's okay. In the 1980s, you had the first guidelines for gender-sensitive language. That was one paper from these two linguists. And also the UN, they had a guide to non-sexist language in these years. Then we also have in the 80s the 𝗵𝗏𝗍. 𝗵𝗏𝗍. That's a way of, that's another way, another form of making women visible in a word, and that works like this. You have lehrer, and then you just make a big I, LehrerInnen, but it's one word, and that's how you make it right. In every word, you would use this.
It's funny that the Germans call it binnen,
Yeah.
not inner.
Yeah, you have that word in German as well.
Binnen?
Yeah, binnen. For example, if you have a waterway that goes within a country or something, then it's a Binnenseeweg. So yeah, you have this word in German as well, but it's a Dutch word as well. Okay, so that's another form. But both this one and this one, they did never really take off. There were times where they were used more and newspapers started to use these forms, but it was never that, it was not enough also, because both the slash and the I, they don't include people of other genders. It's only for the male form, and you make the female form visible here as well, men and women. But there was a need to also include non-binary, intersex, and diverse genders. In the 1990s, you might have heard of the gender star. it's also called the asterisk. Asterisk. That's just how we call this symbol in German. I don't know if it's a common name in English. This star was, it's actually just a symbol. If you Google something and you use an asterisk, then it means that you leave out a word. So if you want to, can we come up with an example? Like
It
you
just
Google
means that Google just
different options that could fill in for the star.
fills in the
For
star.
example, you say, in Germany, there are many, and then you use the star. Then Google comes up with all kinds of examples for things that are many in Germany, right? So it's a placeholder for a word. That's the word I was looking for. It's used as a placeholder. And that makes it interesting because it's something that fills in for different kinds of things. And that's what people were looking for. They wanted to replace different genders by this star. But first it was used by different LGBTQ communities in the US, I think. And it was first used for the trans community. They would start to use it in this way. They would say, they would just use the adjective trans with the star. In 2003, we had another form that came up that was the gender gap. And then here you would just use the underline and pronounce it as this gender pause that I already mentioned. LehrerInnen. And only in 2009, then you have the gender star. The gender star is then first used as a way of making other genders visible in a word.
In the 1990s. What's the difference between?
It came up, but only in the word trans.
Mhm.
It was used like this. And then after you had the gender gap, LehrerInnen, the gender gap was like, it was really a symbolic gap that should create space for other genders. That was really the idea. And 2009, they started using the asterisk just with the same idea. But I also read that, for example, because it's a star, its different arms, they point to all directions, and like all directions of gender. And people found it a nice symbol to replace, to stand for all different kinds of genders.
And the gap in 2003 was an spatie or
An underscore.
Oh.
Yeah. From 2015 onwards, another form developed, the gender colon. Can you imagine all these different symbols in a text? Yeah, it's really there is no, at the moment, there is no uniformity as when it comes to the use, but we'll come to that later. And the interesting about the gender colon is that if you have a screen reader and you let the screen reader read the text for you, then this colon is the most, it works the best for screen readers. The screen reader will just read it as a short path, just like you want it, LehrerInnen. And that makes it also very accessible for people who don't see well, or blind people. Yeah. And that is often used as an argument for the gender colon, because the star, sometimes readers would read asterisk or star, and then the person who's listening is confused. And yeah, because it's so handy, this colon is used often by government institutions.
Can you put the camera a little bit down?
Oh yeah.
See?
Is it better?
Yeah, now you are in front of it. What is the colon?
One moment.
I didn't understand the colon.
Dubbele
Oh,
punt.
just
This
an
one.
empty space. It's just an empty space.
No,
Dubbele punt.
No,
een
I
dubbele
cannot.
punt.
Oh, sorry, I cannot see
Is it too
very
far
well.
away?
Yeah. It's,
Is that better?
yeah, somehow I don't see that, but I understand now. It's a dubbele punt. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last example on the board.
Yes.
And now I don't have any space left. But then we also have 2017. Shall I do it here? 17 and 18. You have first Me Too. And in 18, there was the third sex became legal. You could choose a third sex in the passport
German.
in Germany. 2018, Germany legalized this third option for a third gender, which is usually they call it diverse or other. So if you go to register at your municipality, then you can choose this third option. And because of that, because this became legal, that also triggered a whole debate again about how LGBTQ people and women are represented in our language. Because it's more necessary than ever that we can appropriately describe and talk about everyone. And that triggered an explosion of all kinds of different forms how you can include other genders. So from then on, you just saw more colons, more stars, more gaps, more eyes, more slashes, and everything door elkaar, everything at once, mixed. There's not really uniformity. But you have an instance in Germany, an institution, it's actually a commission that is responsible for German orthography. It's the Rat für deutsche Rechtschreibung. It's the Commission for German Orthography. And they are there, they are responsible for uniformity in orthography, because you have Germany, you have Austria, you have Switzerland, South Tyrol, Liechtenstein, and there's even a German-speaking community in Belgium that use the German language, that write in German. And so this commission is there to uniform. How do you say? Einheit. Uniformity, consistency. Their task is to make the language and orthography consistent across countries. So there's one standard. Of course, you have special things in Switzerland. That's clear, but there is a certain standard. And they usually bring out a paper, a reference paper, where they give their opinion and advice on how to use language. And of course, these gender inclusive ways of writing, they are a big subject for them as well, that they observe it. But so far they have been very, they have stood back and not really taken a position for one of those forms. What they say is the social discourse on the question of how a third gender or other genders can be appropriately designated in addition to male and female is very controversial. Nevertheless, the right of people who feel that they belong to neither the male nor the female gender to appropriate linguistic designation is a concern that should also be reflected in the written language. So they recognize the need that language should reflect minorities as well. In 2021, this commission didn't, even though the gender star and other forms, they're widely used in German by different instances. Like it's interesting, it's kind of rebellion. Some newspapers prefer to use this, others use the star, others use this one. This is mainly in Switzerland, you have that a lot with governmental institutions. So these entities, they just do what they think is good. But these forms are not part of any standard rules. And this commission said in 2021, we don't recommend using, or we don't recommend taking these symbols into the language. Like we don't assimilate them in our reference work, like this paper that they bring out. And what they also say, what did they say here? These characters also have other meanings in the written language. So, of course, the colon, you use it to indicate, you have like a summary sentence, you put there a colon, and then you specify in the rest of the sentence. You use the slash, it has a different purpose in the language. So it can cause confusion, that's what they want to say. As punctuation marks their use within words therefore impairs the comprehensibility, so how you understand words, the legibility. It's not really easier to read. If a text is full of these symbols, it makes it very onrustig. If you look at this text, it looks messy. And also the automatic translatability. So if you want to auto-translate a text and you have all kinds of symbols, that might cause machine translation to not work.
They never use the parentheses.
Yeah, also.
That's in Dutch.
Yeah,
use the
yeah,
parentheses.
okay. You also have
And then just parentheses
in.
Yeah.
But the problem,
Binary.
yeah, it's also binary. And the problem with this version, for example, but also that version that feminists were also aware of was, we don't just want to be the,
Brackets, yeah.
we don't want to be the hypothetical, how do you say it?
The second option.
The second option, the unnecessary part that is like
Between the brackets.
somewhere, between brackets. It also suggests it's not that important. It's just an addition or something. Even that, it's just I don't find the words in English. An aanhang, an appendix. I don't know. An addition, yeah.
But that hebben ze allemaal, they all have that in a way. Ook
Yeah.
all the star. Because you never say the word lerarinnen.
But this is more like it cuts cuts the rest off, and with the star, it kind of stays
it
more one word.
Yeah, okay.
And there it's even intended to include others.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We say
an
leraar.
attachment. Yeah,
We say leraar
lerares.
and lerares,
Mhm.
but then one of the A's is also in parentheses. So you have a leraar,
Dubbel A.
double A, and then you put one of the A's in parentheses, and then you put
Yeah, yeah.
also in parentheses. So both are actually
Okay.
in parentheses with that word. But for example, with secretarian, you would say secretaris, and then you put in parentheses or esse,
Mhm.
secretaresse. Or you put
Okay.
you put it's a secretaris
Slash,
or a secretary,
Secretaris.
secretaresse.
Yeah.
There you don't put the parentheses. There you put it slash. Because
yeah,
the
so-
word really changes
Change.
in Dutch.
Mhm.
Yeah, dat is.
Yeah, we have there are words where this is really problematic. For example, if you have asked, but the female form looks totally different. It's erzin.
Yeah.
So if you just put in here, it's not correct. You would need these as well. That's really, I mean, for non-German speakers, that might be. Oh, sorry, this is not clear because these dots, we need them. But yeah, there it doesn't really work.
Mhm.
So with some words, they won't be grammatically correct anymore. And then let's not talk about even if you put it in plural, then it's getting even more messy. So there are problems connected with this. There are real problems where you don't know, what is more important, that you are grammatically correct or that you include other genders.
Mhm. Or just have
Oh.
a messy text with arts and erzin. Dat je dat helemaal uit.
Yeah, that you have to really name both.
Or then put a slash. Arts,
Mhm. Yeah, but there are
Then you don't have to
even
say
there are situations where you don't have a lot of space.
Mhm.
Or think about a commercial text on your website. You don't want it. You want it to be short and snappy. So, but we'll get to that a little later. It's actually already time, I think, but we have a lot of more material. I don't know if you want to continue. Oh yeah, we started a little. Okay.
Fine.
So okay, so this commission, they see the problems as well that arise with the language. In many cases, also the unambiguity and legal certainty of texts is in danger. So yeah, there might be instances where it's not clear who is meant, even though you also have that with the generic masculine. If to be fair, we would have to say that as well. For this reason, these characters cannot be included in the official set of rules at the present time. So they say, okay, we recognize the need, but at the moment we won't do that. And that was in 2021. They don't recommend any of the forms or take them into the rules. And the same happened in July 2023, and even in December 2023, they said the same again, or they specified a little bit more.
So what would they suppose them to do?
They don't give a solution. They keep observing the controversy, and they observe how language changes, and over time maybe there will be a solution, but that's a very slow process, yeah. Because what they also say, I have a the German Spelling Council, as they name it here, it takes a very cautious approach to the issue, partly because it believes that the question of correct gendering is a social and socio-political task that cannot be solved with orthographic rules and spelling changes alone. And that's true. So they take a non-interventionist approach. They're more descriptive. They observe what changes take place, what people start using, what they abandon using, and then based on that, they make recommendations. So now we already looked at some of the forms that exist, maybe in a more general sense. What forms do we have? What options do we have to make our language more neutral, more inclusive? Sorry, inclusive. And the first approach, so messy. I will remove this. You have two basic approaches. One is visibility, or to make visible. That's basically all we mentioned here. If you add this to a word, you make the woman visible. If you add a slash, you make her visible. If you add a big letter, I, you make her visible. All these options are for visibility. The gap, even if you use brackets, whatever, there are even more options, but the most common, I put them on the board. And the second approach is to neutralize. And that might be a little bit harder to explain. So if you have a word like, we just stay with the word teacher. Lehrer is gendered by nature. But if you use Lehrkraft, you mean a Lehrkraft is a worker who teaches. Then in German, it's ungendered. Or you can use Lehrpersonal. Teaching personnel is ungendered in German. So, and the nice thing about this option is that these words, they already exist. They're not super strange new words, but they're just neutral by nature, and they apply therefore for any person who teaches. Yeah, you can also use it as sometimes you can use the verb teaching and then make it a noun. That would be lerende, lerende. So just someone who teaches as a noun. Or you really go for the activity, the verb, which would be lerend, tätig sein. And that's more difficult, of course. That's, I get that this is difficult to understand if you don't speak German. This is if you are
Practicing.
practicing teaching.
Mhm.
With that would be this. So there are several options. If you're creative with language, you can get around using these. Then your first goal is just to be inclusive, but not that everybody notices. You don't necessarily make it visible for everyone that you want to include everyone. And here the purpose is really to make a statement to be visible. And yeah, so there are different approaches for every situation, every context. One or the other might be more appropriate. And yeah, because before I mentioned, for example, if you're creating a website and you want your copy to be short and catchy, then you don't want to have super long sentences that include all the different forms, the male and the female and the gender star, and make it look messy. But then maybe you can go to the neutral approach, that you just try to be as neutral as possible, and then still include everyone. If you're a company, for example, that writes, if you make a job description because you want to hire someone, then you might even decide to use these symbols to indicate we welcome you, we welcome anyone, and we have a culture in our company that is open for everyone. Mm-hmm. Then you might want to make this visible, and then you might want to use the visible approach. Okay, then let's continue with the question. Do you have any question so far? Okay, let's look at some of the reasons why we would use gender inclusive language. I just write too big. Why gendering? Reason number one, visibility. The traditional customs in our writing, in written language, in German, they can lead to the fact that some sexes and genders are rendered invisible, or they're even marginalized, because we saw with this example of mental representation, if you only always mention the man, the image that comes up in your mind is always male. And by gendering, you try to equalize this. Yeah, you try to make it, the genders equal in the language. The second reason would be awareness. Using gender-sensitive language can improve the awareness of the diversity in our society, and that society gets sensitive to these subjects, and that they also start understanding the importance of inclusion, diversity and inclusion in society. You fight stereotypes. If you have a very gender-specific language, and the habit in this language is to use gender-specific words like the generic masculine, then that can reinforce stereotypical ideas and expectations about men and women as well, and other gender identities. And if you, on the contrary, if you use gender-appropriate language, that can challenge or break down these stereotypes or prejudices. Then we have respect. And recognition, or what do you call respect and, yeah, or appreciation. Oh. Uh-oh. No. If you make an effort to change your language, it can be a sign of respect and recognition for people who do not fit into the traditional gender categories, male or female. This includes in particular non-binary, gender diverse, and transgender people. Then you reflect societal change. Language is something that continuously develops, and that's mainly because society develops and changes, and that should be mirrored in our language as well. For example, a good example for that is that our world has become more globalized in the past decades, and that leads to the fact that English words are more assimilated in many of the European languages. So in German, we have a massive rise of Anglicisms, which is the word for English words that basically become Germanized, or they become integrated in the German language. Words like Google, or to Google something, or download and post, to like a post. That's things that we use daily, words that we use daily, and they reflect a change that has happened in society and that now has an effect on our language. And last, I'm sure there are more reasons, but I have one more. It's to promote equality. language has power, and it influences how we see and understand the world. Gender inclusive language can help to promote gender equality in different areas of life, from education to work to media and politics. And then the other question is, why not? I also have 6 of the common arguments you would often hear, and that's one. It's an ideological force, or to use gender sensitive language is driven by ideology. Left, of course, by left ideology. And now I will always give my answer to these points, just very short, because we cannot really go into all the nitty-gritty details of these arguments. But they say if you use gender inclusive language, that all comes from this gender ideology, and it's all driven by that. It's all a leftist dictatorship. But if you choose to use the generic masculine all the time, is that not an ideology? Is there not an ideology behind that as well? I argue, yeah, because that's also their ideology that they push. It is also ideologically motivated to not use gender sensitive language. And words you, a second point, it's what they say, it's like a language police or dictatorship. Yeah, these people who gender, they are a language police. They dictate language. That's not part of a democracy. That should not be part of a democracy. Someone who corrects how I speak, because I have freedom to speak as I want. But the thing there is, to gender or not to gender, it was never something that was dictated by any government or institution. Gender was never enforced. Gendering was never enforced. But as you will later see, as I already mentioned in the beginning, now the people who always scream that there is a language police and that there is a language dictatorship, now they come up with a ban to ban gendering. So who is the police here? Then another argument they bring up is that it makes it more difficult to learn German. German is already a difficult language for people who want to learn it. And if you introduce all these different gender forms, then it makes it even more complicated. Yeah, difficult to learn. But there I would say, if someone really wants, gendering is voluntary. First, it's not compulsory to use gender inclusive language. And the people who want to learn it, they will also learn it, because it's not really something that is super difficult. if you want to learn it, then you can do it. One more argument is the readability. It's about readability. That means readability if a text is hard to read or if it's easy to read. Readability, complexity, and space can be a problem when writing. And there we already mentioned that there are many different forms of how you can gender words, how you can make others visible, or you can neutralize your words. So you can use several different approaches to achieve that goal. And for every context, there is might be an appropriate, for every context, some other method might be appropriate. Then there is another argument that gendering leads to exclusion. Because nowadays in society, if a school is using gendered language or gender sensitive language, and they write a letter to the parents, and parents are not satisfied with the gendered language, then they can feel excluded because they themselves, they don't use this language, but it's used everywhere at school. Or if you work at the government and the government is using one of these forms and you're not in line with that ideology, so then you can be offended or excluded because you're looked at weirdly if you don't gender nowadays. There is their argument, like, everywhere I go, I hear about this gender language, and if I don't do it, then I'm looked at as if I'm from another planet. I just want to be left alone with this stupid gender language. That's a bit how the argument goes. But then I think you need to weigh your own. What is heavier? Is it heavier to be offended because you use a different language, or is it heavier if your whole identity and even your Existenzberechtigung, even your right to exist, is questioned if gender inclusive language is rejected? So what weighs heavier? Is it someone who is offended because they don't belong to a group, because they don't use the same language, even though it's not even asked of them to do so, it's voluntary? Or is it people who just want to be seen in society? So exclusion, and then you have this commission I already talked about. The commission has not recommended any of the forms, so of course that gives that group a certain legitimacy. They can point to this high entity who is responsible for German spelling, and they say, yeah, commission didn't approve it, so we're not going to use any of these, and it shouldn't be used at governmental institutions as well, because then they impose that ideology on anyone in the public sphere. So commission for German spelling rules. rejects gendering symbols.
Well, did they reject it or they did not accept them? Or were they? Or-
They're not. Yeah, they don't recommend. Let's say they don't recommend, but that's so long.
Recognized it.
It's not in their. It's not in their reference paper.
Adopt it. Did not adopt.
Yeah. Adopt gendering symbols. And that's true. But as they say themselves, this commission says, we think it's not possible to just impose a change by changing spelling rules. It's something that needs to take place in society. It's a social, political issue that needs to be developed. So that's not really an argument to not do it, because it's not forbidden, but it's also not recommended by this commission. It's not forbidden. So you may use gendered language. But now, in certain parts of Germany, there are already bans on using gendered language. In December 2023, the Prime Minister of Bavaria, he already announced that he wants to ban gendered language from schools and the administration. No, yeah, the official administrations. Yeah. That's what he announced in December 23. And in March 24 this year, so a few months ago, the cabinet decided to ban gender inclusive language completely. And that goes for schools, universities, and governmental administrations. They're not allowed to use. No, in Bavaria. Yeah. And they're not allowed to use ways of writing that address several sexes. So that, yeah, they're not allowed to use the gender gap. They're not allowed to use the gender star, not the colon, none of that. I think what they may still do is name male and female both, but then write it out like Lehrer und Lehrerinnen. And they may also use neutral words, but that's not possible in every instance. There's not such a nice solution for every word. It's just not there. So that's why it would be the best, actually, if we could solve everything by neutralizing our language. The language is just, it's not recognizable that you gender anything. That's really a nice thing, and I also like to do that myself when I translate, when I work on texts. Then I always try to do this first, and if it's not possible like that, then I use a symbol. Yeah, but yeah, it's not possible in every instance. And now I just have some excerpts from articles that we could read together.
But if you use a
Yeah.
symbol, which one do you use? The asterisk or the slash or the gap? Yeah.
So when I may most of the time, this is when I have when I have to do it, it's when I work. So I don't really write outside of work. But for my work, I get guidelines, and the guideline I get is to use the asterisk.
Yeah.
So
That one is the most common. No.
And the colon is also, it's like they say the colon is the competition of the star. The star was, for a long time, it was most common, but the star is also very, it has a very controversial connotation because it's including everyone. It's kind of a symbol for the LGBTQ community. And if you use the star, then you are making more of a political statement, or the danger is there that you can come across as making a political statement. So that's why many governmental institutions or TV radio stations and newspapers, they decide to use the colon because it seems to be a little more neutral. So yeah, it's not that one or the other is more popular. It's more, where do you go? Activists would probably rather use the star. Yeah, where do you look? But interestingly, I work then for Indeed. That's this job advertising company, or yeah, where you can advertise a job. And they decided to use the asterisk. Yeah. Shall we? Yeah. Let's read a little part. Oh yeah. Is it?
No.
Should we still read, or is it okay?
I think I need nog maar en one of de bij zwemmen. Hij zegt, het is zo wat, hè? Als ik een zwemmen is.
Oh no.
Dat is helemaal een zwem van zo. Hij kan er zo doen. Hij gaat er ook door.
Okay. We'll just read some short excerpts. Sharing my screen because to translate everything. That's about the gender ban in Bavaria, from an article from the newspaper Zeit. For us, the clear message in that language, or in the German language, the clear message is that language must be clear and understandable, said State Chancellery Head Florian Herrmann, CSU. So that's someone from the Christian Social Union Party, from the party who was banning, the party who banned gendered language. However, the ban is also about keeping the spaces for discourse open in a liberal society. So they want to be very open for different opinions. So also the people who don't think we should use gender inclusive language, they should also be part of the discourse, and it should not just be excluded. On the other hand, ideologically influenced language, such as gendering, has an exclusionary effect. That's what I mentioned here, the exclusion that they know. In certain social milieus, there are also many missionary users in the use of language that is not compatible with an open society. So they behave, these gender people, they behave like missionaries. They want to convert everyone to using gender appropriate language. It is clear that teachers must adhere to this, said Herrmann, in all official correspondence, including letters for parents and all internal communication, as well as in lessons. This is a clear and consistent line, which we are pursuing with a sense of proportion. Oh, what does that mean? So they're just paying attention that people adhere to it. It is particularly important to the state government that no one is disadvantaged if they do not use gender-sensitive language. So here you see that they're really defending people who don't want to gender, and actually exchange the victim role. Like they make the people who do not use gender-sensitive language the victims.
But it's funny that he is saying, klaar is dat leerkrachten zich daaraan houden moeten. Dus
Oh,
so
he
he is
uses
using
the neutral.
leerkrachten. He is using the neutral.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, okay. That's what I said. The neutral way is not forbidden.
yeah, but
can
it's
still
funny that
use that.
the person who wants
Yeah.
forbidden is using
Yeah,
the
which is
neutral, then-
good. And you know, sometimes that's the thing. We should not make a straw man, because sometimes these people, in some way, they acknowledge that that it is important to address people appropriately. And to some extent, they would agree. They would say, it's okay. It's good to make an effort to use neutral terms, but somewhere there needs to be a limit. And then they can they still get their way. But yeah, they put themselves as being reasonable, and yes, I know, yes, this is okay, but somewhere there needs to be a stop. Yeah. So this is what we already discussed. They say gender-sensitive language is ideologically driven, but if you use the generic masculine only, then you also make a statement to which ideology you adhere to. And then they also talk about exclusion, that people who don't use gender-sensitive language are the victims, because they are treated as outcasts. And even that these people then become benachteiligd. Disadvantaged, yeah. Okay. Then I have an article that comments on some of these events. It's the same newspaper. And what is worse, a religious war about gendering is raging. I think that was how we should read. Some universities now insist on the consistent use of gender-appropriate language in coursework and examinations. Although, as I can testify myself, they often don't take common rules and gender legibility beyond political and grammatical correctness very seriously, not to mention plagiarism regulation. Maybe that's a bit... I think the writer, they just want to point out the contradiction that on one hand, they always want to point the left as the one who is imposing a language dictatorship, but now they themselves impose a ban on gendered language. And then I have another excerpt. I'm just going to summarize it. There, the writer points to the fact that this party, when they decided for the gender ban, they used these guidelines of this commission as a base. So to show that they're basically just saying again what the commission decided, that it would be too much of a the decision is based on the guidelines of the German Spelling Council. In mid-December 2023, the Council once again spoke out against the inclusion of special characters in the official set of German spelling rules. The committee pointed out that this involved fundamental interventions in word formation, grammar, and spelling. The new directive from the Hessian Minister-President stipulates that gender equitable language usage can be implemented by using both the feminine and masculine form, with the feminine form coming first. Okay, so that's actually not in Bavaria, that's a different part of Germany, just to show it's already in place in different places of Germany. And here it says also you can still use the feminine and masculine both, but not these symbols. Alternatively, gender-neutral paraphrases are also permitted, such as the use of the term specialists, according to the State Chancellor's statement. So, Fachkräfte, that's the same as we had here with Lehrkraft, just using a neutral term. That is still possible. And to close, maybe it's nice to close with that. Interestingly, the anti-gender crusaders rarely or never seriously take up arms against the Anglicization of the language, even though it bans German at least as much as gender equality. Verbs such as download, like, outsource, or Google mix English phonetics with German grammar. So the English sound mixed with the German grammar, contradicting the rules of German and English spelling and grammar. I liked this post. So then they say that in German, of course, ich habe den Post geliked. The selective blindness of the alleged linguistic purists or Puritans is reminiscent of the attitude of opponents of wind turbines, making the landscape greener, who never say a word against the high voltage pylons, chimneys, office towers, and masses of cars that have been disfiguring the city and countryside for decades. So an interesting compare and contrast. She said, the author says there's a selective blindness among opponents of gender-sensitive language, because they make very loud noise and they protest against anything that is bringing about equality in language. But if it comes to English terms that infiltrate our language, then they don't say anything. It's never so bad that we use words as liking or outsourcing, Googling, just the terms I just mentioned. You don't hear the uproar there. And then she likens that to opponents, people who oppose wind turbines, that you have wind parks, you know, these white things, the windmills, electric windmills. People who are against renewable energies, they would say, oh, these things, we should not place them in our landscape. They destroy the wonderful landscape. It doesn't look nice, but they never say anything about the electricity towers that are everywhere already. I mean, we need electricity and we have these towers everywhere, and the electrical lines that hang in the air, it's even dangerous for helicopters, whatever. They could also fight this, but they don't. So I found that a nice compare and contrast to finish. Do you have any comments to make or a question?
Yeah, would it be more simple if we would go like the other way, like only use the leraar and the male form, but make that the neutral form, like that women also don't say like ik ben een lerarin, but say ik ben een leraar. So yeah, because that is the shorter form. So then the male does become the default, but then to change that idea of leraar is a man to leraar is someone who teaches.
Because you
That will make the language much more simple. And the problem is we have this image of leraar, oh, this is a man, or arts, this is a man. But if we would change that, I think that is the root of the problem, is that we have this idea in our minds that it's a man. And I think that is what we
that's a good
have to
thought.
change. Yeah.
I think there was a time when women, when they entered the workforce, they proudly called themselves the male with the male job title. They said,
Okay.
I'm an arzt. But there was still this need persisted to use the feminine, to represent the feminine.
Yeah.
Because somehow, I think maybe the thought is the step is too big to go directly from and also it's because there are people who argue, yeah, we just use this, but we mean women as well. That's what the opponents, they already say that.
Yeah, but if you would really go that way, but then really take it like not using this in words anymore. Like in the Netherlands, I know, for example, we have director, directeur, and we have directrice, but I think very few people also, when the director is a woman, they usually they don't call themselves a directrice, but just use directeur. So at least at my my workplace, I know we speak about our director calls herself the director using the male form. So yeah, I'm not sure actually. That would be interesting about the history, like, because in the past, like physicians, teachers, there were always men. So the words were arts and leraar, and then when women started working, then I think they started this in words were introduced, or yeah, that's I'm wondering, like, when did this
you're right,
all the
I
female
agree,
words
actually.
came into existence? Like, because I think what I assume is that when women started working and also become teachers and doctors, then they started to introduce these words like ärztin and lerarin. But if they would not have done that, but just call them arts and leraar, because you're doing the same job, so it's that's.
But
Yeah,
there
to
is
me
more
that
than
would,
just job titles, of course.
well, okay, this just, in my opinion, that would be a better solution than, because it would make it much more simple. And
Yeah, I think it might be what we would call the ideal or the utopian thing, but that way I wonder if we need to make the visibility step first, that it's really become
then you
visible.
have no visibility, but then it's just neutral, like, but because like there are other languages where they don't have this gender, where it's like, I know in Indonesia, I can talk to a different language, but because I know a little bit of that language, I know it's neutral. They don't even have he or she. It's all the same word, and they have just one word for teacher, or they don't have, it's a simple language to learn also, but and I think it's the same in other languages as well, that they don't have
Yeah.
this different titles for men and women.
Yeah. That's just the nature of the language.
Yeah.
Because German does have it, then we need to deal with the things we have. I think we need to do the best out of what we have.
Yeah, but if we would just call everyone leraar and arts, I
Yeah, but
think
that's how it has been,
when
and
women
that was
start,
not enough.
yeah, but when women start saying ik ben arts and ik ben leraar, I think then this image in the minds of the people, it will change. It will take time, but
Yeah, I don't know, because it's really a problem in German. It's all masculine, because in German, I know you don't have that in Dutch. Maybe that's the difference. You don't have der und die, because in
yeah,
Dutch it's not
that's
really
also.
gendered. If you
But
just
also,
everything has the same article, but
yeah,
in German you
that's
have
another
everything
thing,
has
yeah.
automatically has a masculine article. So as a woman, you just call yourself a masculine thing. It just contradicts
But you
your
say in German, you say, yeah,
personality.
in German you say der Lehrer und
Yeah.
die Lehrerin.
Yeah,
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 that makes it more complicated
Yeah.
indeed. Because in Dutch we also have leraar and lerares,
yeah, I know.
or
But it has the
koning,
same article.
koningin, or but
Yeah.
it is the same.
I think it's not quite the same. Yeah.
Or women should say ik ben die leraar and ik ben die arts, but
Yeah,
then it's like grammatically wrong.
That's even more unnatural, you know? Then you really
Yeah.
completely change your language.
Yeah.
There are, of course, yeah, there are several options here.
Or they should just also just do away with der, die und das and just call,
Yeah, there are people who
make
suggest we should do
one word,
that.
just
Yeah.
just like in English.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should just
There
speak
is
Dutch.
even there are people who suggest we should do that, but they are
That
looked
would
at
make, and
as extremists.
also, yeah, and also just do away with all those grammar difficulties with the accusative and the dative, just make the language very simple. Then it's much easier to
Yeah.
learn.
There is much you can do in theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem with language. We have a baggage, we carry a baggage of thousands of years with us.
Yeah.
And that is,
The rules in language are patriarchal
yeah.
in our language.
So yeah, the ideal situation is that you don't have any gender in language, that everybody is equal, the teacher is for everybody, and things like that. But I think the problem is that it's so much gendered right now, and that it's no, it's not gendered, it's patriarchal right now. That's what you want to get rid of. And to maintain what is already there is basically maintaining the patriarchal rules and the patriarchal system in language. So maybe it's not like, if you would create a brand new language with brand new world, you would not say leraar and lerarin. You would use everything for one word for everybody. But to get rid of the patriarchal model in language today, I guess this is one of the solutions here on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
At least forces you to get rid of some patriarchal things, to say like, okay, no, I'm going to emphasize that I'm a lerarin. Because otherwise.
But then if you are, let's say, if you are non-binary and you are a teacher, what words can you use? Leraar or lerarin? Or then it's,
that's the problem. It's
yeah.
yeah.
No, if you're not, that's why you have the star. You would use lerarin
So you say
with the star.
with a pause. What's the
Lerarin.
difference between, so you say lerarin or lerarin? Or
Yeah, then you have.
Lerarin.
lerarin, yeah. Lerarin, yeah.
Or leerkracht.
Oh, de leerkracht.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get your point, Wouter. I think
Yes.
you're right. In an ideal situation, that is the
Yeah.
solution. But
I think it's a
that's the
good point.
It's a good point.
Because I look at it maybe as with many other things that we think, okay, even if you look at our human nature, it's not perfect, but we have to make the best of what we have. Our bodies are sick and they're not getting any better, but we do the best with the means we have. We do the best for our bodies to stay healthy. And the same thing we can do with language. If we could invent a new language, it would be ungendered. And yeah, the language we have now, it's not perfect. We do the best of what we have until it's fixed in heaven.
Yeah, I am more of an idealist in that way. Yeah. But anyway, it's not my language, so for me it's maybe easier to say like, oh, just change the whole language completely. But
And maybe might be just a stepping stone in a much longer process of change, because this can take hundreds of years, and in 100 years we look back and think, oh, this is what language was like 200 years ago. Yeah, but yeah, it just all takes much longer. It's very slow.
And of course, maybe not everything is applicable to all languages, but the principles behind this we can bring into Dutch or in Danish into English.
Yeah.
What's in here to try to get rid of the patriarchal system or model even in language, in any language. So maybe to emphasize lerares und directrice or things like that. I don't know.
yeah, but what would be like if you are a female director, for example, what would be more feminist to call yourself directrice, as in emphasizing a woman can be the director as well, or to just use director to say like it doesn't matter which one is like more radical or more activist.
Yeah, I think a radical feminist wants to get rid of the patriarchal model.
Yeah. And
if you call yourself the male director, you maintain the patriarchal model.
But otherwise you maintain the difference between the sexes.
Yeah.
yes.
So there is no...
Yeah, because if you
There's no
use
ideal,
the
I
male
think.
version as a woman, then you are actually saying, hey, a woman can also be the director.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you use the female version as well, so it's
Maybe they would just find a neutral word, school leader.
yeah, but then you need to find a neutral alternative for every word, and that's not always.
But I can imagine that would be the case, and that at some point the other words, they kind of die out.
That can be like in Dutch. I know that they often use leerkrachten or docenten, because docent is neutral. So
if you get
or docent, yeah, they use docenten.
if you train yourself, then you automatically learn what words to use in what such situation. Since I have started working on these texts for Indeed, I know exactly when I know exactly the words where I can use the neutral form. Then I usually spot them immediately and can correct them. So from experience, it's also something you train your brain into. Shall we close with prayer? We can still continue talking, but maybe then we can stop the recording. Dear God, we thank you that we could think about language this morning, that we could dig a little deeper and think about how it's connected to our culture, to our identity, and that there is a need that our language reflects what changes take place in society. We want to be part of these changes and see how we can think about the words we use and where we can apply certain gender inclusive measures, so that we train our brains to be more inclusive, to see the world with different eyes, because that's eventually what it does. If we change our language, then we also change how we see the world. And we thank you for this little glimpse and discussion we could have this morning on language. May you be with us during the week that is ahead of us, but now also in the Sabbath hours, that they may contribute to our rest and that we can make a fresh start into a new week. We thank you for everything in Jesus' name. Amen.